Welcome to the Multiply Your Success podcast, where each week we help growth-minded entrepreneurs and franchise leaders take the next step in their expansion journey. I'm your host, Tom Dufour, CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team, and I'd like to welcome you to our 5-year anniversary episode. And I want to thank all of you loyal listeners that have been with me and with us over the last many years. And if you recall, our very first show was the day after Father's Day, and our first interview was with my dad. Now, if you're new to us, I interviewed my dad originally as a practice interview, and I decided to keep it after I realized that I would be launching the podcast right after Father's Day. I thought, boy, what a great way to do that. If you decide to listen back to episode 1, you'll learn about my dad and me and hopefully hear how far our show has come from episode 1 to today at episode 262 for our 5-year anniversary. Now, as part of our anniversary celebration, I always like to interview a very special guest, and this year is no different. Our guest today is Mike Andes, who asked how he can make franchising great for his system. His solution? Well, he decided to take everything most people hate about franchising and change it. So if you're new to franchising or thinking about franchising your business, this episode is for you. Now, Mike is the founder of Augusta Lawn Care, a home service franchise that has scaled to over 150 locations across the United States, Canada, and Australia. His mission? To transform the blue-collar business landscape and help small business owners achieve financial freedom and sustainable growth. You're going to love this interview, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'd love for you just to start maybe talking about your business and what you do. What led you to start thinking of expanding and eventually franchising?
Yeah, so when it comes to lawn care, like you mentioned, it's a relatively simple service. It's one of the lowest barrier to entry jobs/businesses you can get started in. And so a lot of times people are like, why in the world do you franchise a lawn care business? And so the reason I actually did was way back when I started my lawn care business, I was 11 years old. Mowed grass just so I could pay my way through college. I started college when I was really young. I was 13 years old, and I went to pre-med, thought I was going to become a doctor, ended up dropping out of medical school, and the only thing I knew how to do was mow grass. So started Augusta Lawn Care. That was a little over 10 years ago now. About 5 years into it, we did franchise, but a couple years prior to that, I got in a workplace accident underneath a dump truck, got sucked up into the PTO, ended up in the hospital. And in that kind of mend period, a couple of weeks of not being able to work, I realized my business had no systems, no procedures. It was built on me being there every single day. I was literally FaceTiming my crew from the hospital bed, showing them the next project. And so the next couple of weeks as I was on the mend, just like really started to think through what are the systems and procedures required to run a business that does not rely on me working 80, 90 hours a week. And I started just sharing that on YouTube and made landscapebusinesscourse.com, which is free, and just started sharing my story. Like, here's the systems I'm changing. I'm changing how I pay my guys. No longer by an hour, it's based upon performance. Now I make estimate videos, so I don't have to go to the job site and show the crew a job once I've done the estimate. All these systems in the business. What I started to realize is people didn't listen. They didn't listen because they looked to me as like a content creator, a consultant, someone that makes videos, whatever. But what I wanted was to change the level of professionalism in the landscape industry. And I just didn't see anyone doing it. And for me, it was frustrating because I saw what it did for me in my business. In 2 years after instituting pay for performance, I went from working 80, 90 hours a week in the business and hardly making any profit, not being able to afford raises for the crew or benefits or anything, to 2 years later, I took $280,000 in distributions from that same location and went there for 2 meetings a week. And so I knew it could do for me. And it was so frustrating that when I share that story with other people on YouTube and podcast, no one listened. And so I figured the only way to actually see the change I wanted was to be on the same team as them, have brand equity, that we were together in this together. And that's why we franchised. And I had already been a franchisee at Anytime Fitness and seen the power of systems and having 5,000 locations and the power of the software that they can build together. And I want to do the same thing for the lawn care industry. And so then it's just a matter of like, hey, let's take everything that people hate about franchising and just do the opposite. So we don't charge a royalty. The initial fee can get refunded back to the owner as long as they stay inside the systems for 5 years. And then the 3F program is a franchise fee forgiveness program. If you work as a lawn care technician out in the field for 2 years, you can join the franchise for free. We just try to go through every single aspect that I, as a franchisee, had trouble with. And then I interviewed over 50 other franchisees from other home service franchisors before starting the franchise and say, what's your pain points? What do you not like? And a big one is like the royalty, because as you get a $2 million business, I'm now paying way more on royalties than I was when I was 100 or 200,000 annual revenue. And yet I know the systems, I know the procedures, I know how this is supposed to operate now. And so just trying to do what was right by the owner. And that's really been our focus from day one.
That is phenomenal with what you're describing. And I just want to unpack what you said a little bit, because someone who might listen in and say, wait a minute, you give the franchise fee back, no royalties. How in the world do you generate revenue as a franchisor to support that system? So how do you manage that as the franchisor?
Our franchise, the Give Back program, for example, where they get the franchise fee back, basically after 5 years, they can roll that initial fee into another location, or they can wait till the end of their term, 10 years, and just get the cash back, like literally a check back to them. And they just have to follow 3 systems: pay for performance, they have to wrap their trucks correctly, and have to do open book management with their team to be able to share the numbers with their team. As long as they do those 3 things, they'll get the money back. That being said, there's people who quit, there's people who give up, there's people who sell their business, and they're not going to get that money back. And so my incentive in this case is to keep them in business, because they're paying a flat monthly fee of $1,600. So like, I just need to keep them in business. That's my objective. Whereas when there's a royalty structure in place, I find that the franchisor has perverse incentive to inflate top line revenue. So encourage people to overspend on marketing, overspend on salespeople, overspend on a lot of aspects, because they're just trying to inflate top line revenue. They don't care about the bottom line profit. And so another thing that I was really adamant about too is like allowing people to leave the franchise at any time with their customers for no penalty. And no one does that. And I understand why, because it's freaky. But bottom line is like, it forces us as the franchisor to constantly improve the systems, constantly offer more value, constantly offer more training and support and surveying the owners. And so it's not easy. It's very difficult to run a system where people can leave at any time and take their business elsewhere, especially in a low barrier to entry market like lawn care. But it keeps us honest. And ultimately, building a franchise, I think the number one thing that keeps this industry really held back is we build businesses and franchisors build the business in a way to sell it to private equity or a 5, maybe a 10-year term. But if you were building that business over the course of 100 years, if you were actually asking yourself, what does this business look like in 100 years, you would structure it differently. You'd go slower. You would listen a lot more. You'd think about the owners a lot more. You'd think about the brand reputation in 20 or 30 years from now. And that's really why I think so many franchisors fail, why so many don't get to 100 locations, and that the vast majority of them will never become profitable, because you usually have to get over 100 locations to become profitable. And I really hate the fact that the franchisor world gets such a bad rap, when I think franchising is a beautiful thing in terms of following systems, having support, having back end, the ability to be able to use common practices, use across hundreds of locations, and then just follow the system and avoid all the pitfalls. I love it. But there are so many bad actors when it comes to franchisors. There are so many people that just think they can franchise their system. They don't support their franchisees. They take a royalty off the top without giving the support required to actually be successful. And it gives a bad rap to the industry, unfortunately.
That's completely spot on. And it's something that we even share and talk often with our clients in the capacity, and summarizing this in the way that we say it, essentially, as long as you keep asking, how are you helping your franchisees grow their business, make it more profitable, essentially helping them accomplish their goals? How can you help your franchisees first? And then the follow-up is, well, how does that help me as the franchisor? Whereas oftentimes founders start with I want to serve and help my franchisees, but over time that gets converted and it starts switching to say, well, how can I, as the franchisor, start making more money? And when that's first, that's the beginning of the end, because you're going the wrong direction at that point.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, people can say whatever they want, but if you look at the franchise disclosure document, it'll tell you whether or not they care about their franchisees. And so for me, I want to make sure that if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, that no one could undo the culture that we wanted to have, and from the onset of putting the owners first. And so if you actually care about your franchisees, you will put it in legal writing. You will have a franchise advisory council set up. You will have the ability for people to outvote you. You will have the ability for people to leave. You will have all of these things. You won't be penalizing them for every little thing. We don't have a renewal fee. We don't have a lot of these things, because if it's in documentation, regardless of what happens to me, or I change my mind tomorrow, or I sell a private equity, it can't change. And so you show me your franchise disclosure documents, I'll tell you the true value you put on your franchisee and whether or not you actually look to them as a partner instead of a customer.
amazing focus that you have there and a commitment really to your franchisees and what they're looking to do. Well, one of the things you talked about is this pay for performance that you have in place. And that's one of the three requirements that you have in order for the franchise fee to be returned at the end of the 10 years. Talk a little bit about what that is in an industry and just in general where hourly pay, salaries, and things are very common.
Yeah, like in a nutshell, if I'm explaining to someone, P4P is essentially the harder you work, the more money you make. And all it is they get a percentage of the labor revenue they earn for the business. That's their wages. And like, how is that compliant? Well, we're still making sure they get at least a base pay, and it's going to be above minimum wage. They're still going to get overtime. But if they're earning enough for the business, they'll make substantially more on pay for performance. And so what this does is align the incentives of the owner and the employee. Because right now, if you're paying someone by the hour, the longer the job takes, the more money they make. Whereas for you, if you're doing a bid on a job, the shorter the job takes, the more money you make as an owner. And so that's why there's this inherent friction between owner and employee, is because we have different incentives, which we want. One person wants to go faster, the other one wants to go slower. By having P4P, you basically say, hey, look, as long as this job gets done to the customer satisfaction and as quickly as possible, everyone makes more money. So now we're all talking the same language. Now, is it easy? No. The reason we pay hourly is because it's simple and it's lazy. You just literally clock in and out. At the end of the week, you multiply that by a certain hourly rate and you give them someone a paycheck. It's a lot more difficult to say, okay, there's hourly rates that we have to calculate how much you earn each day. We have manual deductions. If you go too fast, you create yellow slips or callbacks. If you lose a customer, if you have non-revenue producing tasks like sharpening the blades or changing the oil, these things all have to be accounted for. What happens if you have a really good employee with a brand new employee that's getting trained? Well, this person's going to slow this one down. How do we account for that? So yeah, there's a lot of variables that have to be figured out. We created software just so it could make it work. But ultimately it comes down to, if you want your employees to think like owners, they need two things. They need to be paid like an owner. That's pay for performance. And they need the information of an owner. And that is open book management. And so in our opinion, in order for us to change the level of professionalism in the landscape industry, where the stereotype is it's a 2 or 3 month stint job, summer job. It's you show up, you're smoking, some guy's smoking, music blaring, not in a uniform, not in a nice truck. Like if we're going to change that perception, it starts with the employee and giving them the information and the composition that an owner has. And if you're complaining and you're in the labor industry about the fact that you can do twice as many jobs in a day, you're way more efficient than your crew. Yeah, you're right, because you're getting paid like an owner. And you're getting you have the information of an owner. And if you give those things to your team, there's a higher likelihood that they will treat it like their own.
As you incorporated these models into your own original operating location, and then with franchisees, as they start incorporating this, what have you found to be maybe some of the challenges or common roadblocks that folks see when implementing this type of a pay for performance here?
Yeah, you got to have accurate pricing. You got to have accurate budget hours on the jobs, because if the crew's getting paid a percentage of that revenue, but you're way inaccurate, some jobs are way over, some are way under, they're going to get discouraged. You need full transparency. A lot of people like, oh, I'm going to do P4P, but then they won't share the numbers with their team. So their team doesn't trust them. And so it's imperative that everyone is above base pay on P4P. In other words, there's motivation to make more money than what they're guaranteed at their base wage. That way, when they actually make a mistake and there's a callback, there's money on the table to take out of. So for example, if someone backs up over a mower and causes a $200 damage case. Well, if they have $500 on this week's paycheck as a bonus on P4P, that $200 is coming out of that $500. And so now there's a culture of accountability within the team. They have to go fix their own mistakes. I'm not going to run around and fix all their mistakes. If they made a mistake and they were going too fast because they're trying to beat the clock and make more money on P4P, that's fine. They're going back and fixing the skid mark from the mower. They're going back and talking to the customer. And so it's just putting accountability back to the frontline team members and allowing them to win or lose based upon their own performance.
When you first started implementing this, as you talked about the transition of your own business after the accident and the injury and recovery, and kind of recognize what you started making some of these changes. For the staff that stayed around, how did you see that impact them? Or even with some of your franchisees and the staff that they bring on?
Very quickly, you learn who your lowest performers are. They're the ones who complain now all of a sudden. They're the ones that all the high performers don't want to work with. So low performers will get sniffed out of the system very quickly, because most time people don't want to be that guy and rat out all their employees, their fellow coworkers that are, taking longer lunch breaks, slacking off, stopping at every gas station. They don't want to be that person. However, if it affects their paycheck, now they're gonna care. And so if you're on a crew with someone, now all of a sudden their performance actually affects your paycheck. Because together as a crew, you make a certain amount of revenue and you get a cut of that together. And so now all of a sudden, your lowest performers will not last. It really does shed away B and C players. People that are money motivated, they love it. They're willing to work harder, longer hours. They're willing to push through, and they think like an owner, which usually means when someone implements, about 20% of the workforce is going to leave. They don't like it. They don't like being pushed. They're used to being able to sap the clock and take long lunch breaks and stop at every gas station. And they're not motivated by money. But what usually happens is we see about a 20 to 30% increase in efficiency. And so the rest of the team is able to pick up their slack. You basically get the same amount of work done with just less employees.
Now, one of the things you talked about early on is that you started sharing this information originally through social media, where you just, before you started franchising, you just wanted to share it and help raise the standard of the industry at large. Talk about your use and incorporation of social media. I think a lot of times owners and founders, they're scared to start incorporating or using it. They don't know where to start. They don't know, like, why would I even do this? How is this going to help my business? Talk about how you used it and might address some of those questions.
Yeah, so to be clear, if you have a local business like a lawn care business and you have no intention of, making an impact or franchising or getting into the content game, like making content on YouTube or social media is not going to help your local business. It's just not. The target audience for YouTube is the entire world. You might serve 10 or 15,000 customers in your local area. So like getting views is not going to be super beneficial. It's probably going to be more beneficial that you do direct response marketing in your local market and spend your time and attention doing that. That being said, when I made videos to start off, I knew that if I would have had a family, independence, and I would have gotten that accident, I would have gone bankrupt otherwise. I was in a very fortunate circumstance to be able to be living at home, not have a lot of financial obligations, and I was able to get through that tough time. But most people would have gone bankrupt. And that's why so many businesses fail in this industry and home services in general, and most businesses in general, honestly, small businesses, is everything's hinging on the owner. And I wanted to build a business that could run without me, could have systems in place that regardless of their local or it's on the other side of the country, the business runs. And then I really own a business and not a job. I wanted to give that to other people because I knew that there was plenty of other people that in my scenario would have gone bankrupt. There would have been a lot of pain. I knew what bankruptcy had done to my family when I was growing up and the pain that caused. And so I was just sharing videos of like, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm thinking going to work. And like, here's the results of my Facebook ads. And I was just like sharing information. It was only after a couple of years of that where I'm like, okay, I'm going to need a franchise. I'm going to take this content thing really seriously now. In 2020 is when I got my first full-time editor. And then since then, it's scaled up. The team is now like 10 to 12 people. We do tons of content on all platforms. Yeah, it's quite the production now.
One thing I was thinking about for your business in any of the types of trades, home services, commercial services, oftentimes they're highly fragmented where you have a lot of independents and mom and pop operators. And as you have expanded your franchise, are you looking primarily for startup, kind of a traditional franchisee that comes in and maybe has no experience in your industry? Are you working with existing landscapers or lawn care companies that might be coming into your business? Talk about how you've addressed that situation.
Yeah, it's a pretty good split of like people just starting out, never been in the industry before, seeing this as an investment opportunity, getting out of their 9 to 5. And then the other half being existing businesses in the lawn care and landscaping industry that realize that they need systems in place so they can run the business without themselves being there all the time. They want multiple locations. They want the support for their general managers, regional manager, and having the back end of like their office. So this is our command center behind me, answering phones, et cetera. So it's kind of a 50-50 split. And, there's businesses that have joined that are already doing over $1 million in revenue in the lawn care industry that will join. And again, it's incentivized like actually heavier for them because they still pay $1,600 a month. Doesn't matter if you do $2 million in annual revenue or $200,000, you're paying the same amount per month. So it actually makes more sense even for people that are larger to be joining. So we've kind of seen a 50-50 split of both. And I think as we go up market, in other words, we are increasing like our capital requirements to join, we will see probably more and more existing owners switch over because the network of the brand just gets stronger. Like so step back for a second, it's like so on the media team, we have a lawn care web design and home service web design. We build websites for people in this industry. So we can see all the data there. For Augusta Lawn Care, and this is the advantage of general of joining a franchise, is you have search engine optimization and you have Google authority to your domain. So like when we start a new location, usually within a week or two, we're on the first page of Google. Whereas when we build sites for our clients that are, independent, it can take 3 to 6 months. This is the type of advantage of joining a franchise and having a bunch of locations, et cetera. I can kind of see the difference between an independent versus a franchise in that regard. So some people are just like, hey, I'd rather just shortcut the whole 6-month thing, hop into the franchise, get leads much faster. I don't want to have to build an office. I don't want to have to go find a shop space to rent. I'll just have command center, do my stuff. If I want a general manager to run the location for me, I don't want to have to train them. I want to send them here. You guys train them in a week. You guys do the support on a monthly coaching call. So it just, I don't think everyone should join a franchise, but yeah.
You talked about some of the growth and franchisees coming on board with the 50-50 split of someone that's existing in the space and someone that's new in startup. It made me think back to a comment you said earlier about thinking 100 years from now and setting the business up and the franchise up from there. I guess I'd be curious just to ask, as you've been growing through franchising, where have you started? How many units are you up to? What's your goal? Or as you start thinking and have been planning for maybe 100 years out from now?
Right now we're at 170 locations. I think we need to get to about 1,000 locations in order to have the impact we want on the industry. And then when I say about that is like when we start competing in a market, that's when we see other competitors start to change their behavior. Because if we answer our phone 24/7, if we go into a market and all of a sudden the customer expects that, now all the competition has to match it. Or they have to get better. The same way like Amazon came along, they're doing 2-day shipping, free returns. That wasn't a thing 20, 30 years ago. And so people either adapted to it, and now everyone, Walmart, et cetera, has to do that, or they died. And so our way of changing the level of professionalism in the industry is changing the expectation of the customer so that our competitors has to change and adapt the standards we have. They have to pay their employees based on performance because now the employees want that or they're going to go to Augusta. The customer is demanding the fact that, hey, you got to answer your phone because like, they're going to be answering it 24/7 and giving me instant pricing over the phone. Our goal is just to get to 1,000 locations. I think by doing that, we'll be able to have enough penetration in the market to be able to have the impact we want.
Changing gears a little bit was this 7 stages of business wealth that you talk about. So I'd love for you to just talk through that and talk through those stages.
I think a big part of a franchise is having frameworks so that when things happen in the business, inevitably there's going to be challenges and hurdles that you're not left guessing. You're like, oh man, am I different? Am I strange? Am I weird? I think that's the reason for a lot of times people quit is because they feel like they're not capable of getting to the next stage of growth. They're not capable of getting through the obstacle. And so the nice thing about a franchise is you see the same people using the same systems every single time, and you start to see patterns. And so what we try to do is just create frameworks around the patterns we see every single time. So like I know from 0 to 100,000, these are the things you're going to be feeling. From 100,000 to 200,000, these are the things you're going to be feeling. From 200,000 to 500,000, here's what the business is going to look like. Here's the struggles you're going to have, and here's how you're going to overcome them. And so when we talk about the 7 stages of wealth, it's essentially inside of what we use inside of Augusta Nation is because we are incentivized to keep the community strong and people don't want to leave. Like that's our main objective. And so when people are successful in their first location, they want multiple locations. And they get multiple locations, they want to keep moving forward. Like they might want to invest in real estate. They might want to invest in the stock market. We want to actually facilitate them investing in other businesses, other ventures, investments. So for example, this July, we have the 7-Figure Club. If you have over $1 million in revenue, you come out for a retreat, we do a day long, and we're talking about things like B Corps. We're talking about ESOPs. We're talking about tax planning. We're talking about real estate investments, stock portfolio stuff, because we're trying to just overall increase the wealth of the owner. And so instead of just looking at like, oh, we want to have a successful lawn care business, it's like, how do we holistically think about how do we make these people rich? And that is like the framework I look through because if I'm going to think that way after 5 or 10 years, I need to give them like, what's the next stage? Like I want to invest in real estate. Okay, great. How do you do that? Okay, should I do an Airbnb so I can get accelerated depreciation? What does it mean to be a real estate professional so I can get much better tax? Can my spouse do that? So I'm able to get those same benefits. These are the type of things that we actually still want to give the education to the owners. And I would challenge franchisors to think holistically about the wealth of your owners instead of just like, oh, my job is to give them a successful business. They did not come to you because they wanted a great painting business or wanted a great sub sandwich business. They came to you because they wanted to make a lot of money. They wanted to build wealth for their family. And there's reasons as to why they want that wealth, whether it be sending their kid to college, getting another house, being able to retire early, get out of a 9-to-5. And so build the franchise around that, like make them more money. And then they can do whatever they want with the money. I don't care less. But I just know if I can make them more money and then build their wealth, that they'll be able to do stuff more with their life. And I believe that money will be used well. And so we've really tried to focus on like what are the 7 stages of someone going from 500,000 in annual revenue is the first step, all the way to the last step, which is diversification, and as stocks, real estate, et cetera. In between that, there's a lot of steps, and one of them is like multiple locations, finding a general manager. These are different stages that as you move, making one location successful is great. Then how do I actually systematize it and get a general manager in place so it runs without me? Then how do I copy and paste that model? And then how do I actually start diversifying to other asset classes that are going to be much more tax advantaged is really the 7 stages of wealth.
This is something then that you share and use as a framework within your franchise network as a kind of a training system or platform. Is that what I understand?
It's the common language we use, right? So like when we do our coaching calls, it's always like, hey, what stage of growth are you in? What stage of wealth are you in? Are you in profit mode or are you in growth mode? This is the common language you build so that when people are talking inside the franchise, we all talk the same language. Like if someone says they're in profit mode, I immediately know, okay, they're not buying trucks, they're not hiring employees. They are just simply raising prices whenever they hit capacity. I know that. And the way I will talk to them is very different than if someone says they're in growth mode, because I know they are going lower in price. They're trying to increase their close ratio. They're trying to win every single job. They're probably spending money on marketing. And so it's a different language. It's a different way of cutting out so many variables when you just say a term. When you have, hey, I'm in this stage of growth. Oh, I immediately have all these assumptions that I know are true. And that's the power of having a community and having a language in the same way that we have an English language or we have a Chinese language. We have certain agreed upon rules of the language. And so I think inside of a community, whether it be a franchise or a mastermind or a network of any sort, it's like you create common rules that we all agree to. And that is the language by which we can speak and get over a lot of hurdles that otherwise make it difficult to communicate. Like if for me to be able to smile and immediately I'm happy, that is a rule that we now have ascribed to, that if I smile, we can both assume I am happy. If I say I am in growth mode, we can assume all of these other things because we're in this community and we've adhered to this certain language. And so that's kind of how I think about community building in general.
You've provided so many great just pieces of information, nuggets, wisdom in franchising. I feel like you've already answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, is we will help companies launch and go into franchising as a franchisor business and work with a lot of emerging franchise brands. So what advice would you give to an emerging franchise brand, knowing what you know now? What advice might you give to someone as they're kind of launching into this franchise world?
If you're just getting started, I have a really clear path to 100 locations. It's really difficult to be able to support the franchisees at the level required and be profitable when you have 5, 10 locations. Like you just can't give them the support they need with the money you're making back from them. And so we had a very clear, like, here's how we're going to get to 100. And like, we got a gun for it. And it was like, I lived in the closet of the office just so we could conserve cash for 3 years, getting to 100 locations so we could become profitable. We didn't have outside funding. If you have outside funding, maybe you can cut a few little corners and that's helpful. But if you're trying to bootstrap, it's going to be really, really difficult for the first few years. Once you come to terms with that, then it's a matter of like, build the franchise in a way that you would be the franchisee. And so because I'd been a franchisee prior, it kind of gave me a leg up in terms of what I wanted. I wanted a franchise advisory council. I wanted to be able to leave at any time. I didn't want a royalty. I didn't want a renewal fee, all these sort of things. And then I would say, once you have franchisees, religiously survey them and ask them what you can do better and track every single thing in terms of their satisfaction. If you make them happy, they will sell franchises for you. We don't run a ton of ads. I don't do a whole bunch of, like, literally this shirt in my YouTube videos is the extent of our advertising. And that is like, people just eventually will see that on my shirt and they'll go look it up and they get into the funnel. But the reason for that is because the owners, they believe in it. They our NPS score last quarter was 71, pretty good. But it's been a long, long trail of getting that up, because when we first started, it is low. And you survey and you ask them, like, what can we do better? Okay, so what do you like about this? Do you like this? Having surveys, like, survey them so much and then take their feedback and do it. And like, prove to them after every survey, here's all the things that you said that we need to improve. And 3 months later, here's everything that we did. And now more, like, what's next? And that's how you increase your net promoter score, NPS score. And that's how you get franchisees to start selling for you.
That's great advice. And real quick, for someone who listens and say, well, what's an NPS? I mean, what's that acronym?
Yeah, so it's a range from negative 100 to positive 100. And 0 would mean that everyone is like neutral about your brand. If it's positive, it means that there are more promoters than detractors inside of your business. And so it's a very quick and easy way to be able to know what is the customer satisfaction. And so like, I think Chick-fil-A is like 67. You got like Apple is something like 50 something. So like it's kind of all over. And then you have like some of the most happy, I think Amazon Amazon's pretty high up there, but it's a kind of a metric. And the question that is asked is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to refer XYZ service to your friends and family? It's across the board. That is the net promoter question. And so if someone scores 6 or below, they're considered a detractor. They're actually taking away from the brand. They're considered a negative. If they're a 7 or 8, they're neutral. They don't do anything. You basically would be stuck at 0. And then if you have people that are in 9s and 10s, those are people that are promoters. And that's when you have a plus number. So, it's a really nice way to be able to, across businesses, across industries, know what customer satisfaction is. So like a Copilot CRM, which is the software side, we do the net promoter score as well. We know what that is. And I can actually compare like the two businesses and be like, okay, one's in software, one's in franchising, but I can still know like the general satisfaction of the customer.
Mike, for someone who's listening in here and says, boy, I love the message Mike's sharing. I'd love to learn more, get in contact with him. What's the best way for someone to reach out to you or get in touch with your business?
YouTube, we do a ton of stuff on YouTube every week. I go fly out to companies and we try to turn them around. If they're struggling, we do it for free. We just record it. And so probably really beneficial of your home services. MikeAndes.com, I have free courses. So once I did my MBA, I actually made a whole course on the MBA that is good for small businesses. It's all free on there. And then if you like books, there's a book too. It's free on my podcast, but you can buy it on Amazon. Yeah. So just go to MikeAndes.com. There's a ton of stuff on there.
Excellent. Well, Mike, this is the time in the show when we ask every guest the same 4 questions. And the first question we ask is, have you had a miss or 2 on your journey and something you learned from it?
Yeah. So like the most recent one is last year, we launched software that we have available to public as well as our franchisees. And it tripled in size in a matter of a couple months in terms of number of members, entered massive bug hell with spammers get into the system and start spamming emails and text messages. Everything started to break. Just trying to rebuild it. We're kind of just getting back on track now. So it's been quite the learning curve. The level of talent and skill required in terms of engineers has been the skill I've been learning, like attracting really great engineers, certainly an L in the past couple of years.
Let's take a look on the flip side, a win, a highlight.
Honestly, the Net Promoter Score is the most top of mind because literally yesterday it came out. It means a lot to me that the owners are seeing the improvements and that over the course of that year or two, we've almost doubled that by just focusing on them, surveying them, improving systems and the software and the coaching program and all these things we're trying to do. And so it means a lot to me. That's definitely the most top of mind win.
For folks who are familiar with the Net Promoter Score, the number you're at is tremendous. It is a very high number and difficult to reach. You're working hard on behalf and you're working hard for your system. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about a multiplier. The name of the show is Multiply Your Success. Have you used a multiplier to grow yourself personally, professionally, or any business you've run?
Even last year, when I go back to my L, in the software side of things, I think a big part of that was not reaching out and having networks of people that had done that before. And so not being in the right rooms, whether it be conferences, masterminds, coaching, et cetera. I'd always been very cheap. I was raised without a lot of money. Like even when we grew the franchise, I was being very cheap. I had to cut so many corners in terms of living in the closet and doing stuff like that. But then when you get to a certain level, you have to realize that you got to pay money to be able to shortcut the amount of skill that's required to stay up with the business, because you just simply cannot learn every single thing yourself. And if you are, it's going to take a long time. And so when the business grew so fast with the software side, I realized this massive skill gap. I should have for a long time beforehand, but ended up having to learn the fact that I can go get these skills. I can learn these things from coaches, masterminds, getting in the right rooms. And yes, that's going to cost me money. And so for a while, my living expenses were far less than what I was paying in coaching, but it was the thing that was required for me to get to the next level. And so the sooner you can do that, the better. I think that over coaching is actually a bigger problem though, counter to that. And that's getting so many how-tos and what I should do next instead of just going out and implementing. So there's a balance there, but I certainly was indexing far too much and just head down doing the work versus looking up and oh, someone else has done this before. I can unlock these secrets from them. And so I would certainly, as soon as you can afford it, try to unlock those secrets from people who have already made those mistakes.
The final question we ask every guest is, what does success mean to you?
Contentment. When I was in Africa, I was with a bunch of the orphans, and over there you just realize that we would give them a little bubbles or a soccer ball and they'd be busy all day long and they just thrilled out of their mind. And these are kids that were abandoned by their parents. One was thrown inside of a fire. One was thrown off of a train, and yet they were just thrilled out of their mind. And so after that, when I was 18 when I went there, I just realized that hey, success and money is cool, but the standard at which I am quote unquote successful is when I'm content. And that for some people that can be billions of dollars and they are not content. And therefore I do not see them being as successful. And so that benchmark has served me well.
Mike, thank you so much for a fantastic interview. And let's go ahead and jump into today's 3 key takeaways. So takeaway number 1 is when Mike talked about when he said, let's take everything that people hate about franchising and change it. And so for him, he got rid of royalties and has the give back program and all of these other things that he decided to change. And really the takeaway is not that he's changing all of these things specific for his business. It's that he thought about what is the problem, what are the challenges, what causes friction or challenges between franchisors and franchisees, especially in his specific industry. And he decided to make a change to that or to create a solution. So the takeaway is, what can you take and apply to your franchise organization? Takeaway number 2 is when he talked about the 7 stages of business growth. And this is where he has found consistent patterns with his franchisees and has these various stages, these 7 stages, and he has found common problems in each of those stages for the franchisees that are in those areas. And so they have specific solutions for those franchisees. So to me, the takeaway is, what are those stages for your franchise system? And if you don't know, start looking back. There's likely some evidence or information that you can pull from to build out your own stages to improve your franchisee support. Takeaway number 3 is when he talked about his multiplier. And his multiplier was when he realized that he had to go out and learn from professionals, coaches, consultants. And he said, as soon as you can afford it, you need to start pursuing that or going after that. And he said he found that he was being cheap by not attending conferences or joining masterminds or hiring quality consultants. So I think that's a great lesson to help accelerate your growth. And you can likely eventually learn a lot of these things, but what's the cost of time to you in that regard? And now it's time for today's win-win. So today's win-win came from when he talked about the advice he would give to an emerging franchise brand. And he said, it's hard to provide support, but what he decided to do is to take action and create a survey to survey his franchisees and listen to what they say. Don't just take that survey and let it sit and do nothing with it. Rather, take the survey, the information, and be thoughtful and considerate with it, and to start implementing that. And for them internally, he uses a net promoter score along with the other information they share. And I'm certain that it is a win for him as the franchisor. There's a win for the franchisee, and for sure there is a win for the customer and the staff and the team of each of those organizations. So I just think it's a great, great little nugget and little takeaway that's easy to implement. You think about the cost of implementing it, very low cost. But it's the commitment to do it, and it's going to hold you accountable as a franchisor to provide better support and service to your franchisees. So really, really great, Mike. And so that's our episode today, folks. Thank you again for being our loyal listeners all these years. If you have not subscribed to our podcast, please make sure you do so. Please give us a review. And remember, if you or anyone you know might be ready to franchise their business or take their franchise company to the next level, please connect with us at BigSkyFranchiseTeam.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to having you back next week.